Thank you for having me here today. Yeah, I'm Chris McDonald. I'm a natural resource advisor. I work for the University of California Cooperative Extension. I cover most of Southern California, San Diego, Riverside, Imperial, San Bernardino counties. My specialty is this microphone okay with everybody? Yeah. All right. My specialty is habitat restoration, weed management. I do a little bit about oaks and oak restoration. I work on hard to control weeds, fuels management on roadsides, things like that. A couple of you are familiar, but it's good to see you all here today. And I didn't do that. No, there's about, it's closer, okay. There's a bunch of green lines that say the battery is not dead. Okay. So I crafted a weird presentation today because I was told that you're from a variety of different places. How many of you work like professionally in land management or conservation? Okay, how many of you are growers? And how many of you are just from the general public and yeah. Volunteers. Right. You all have non-overlapping needs when it comes to restoring landscapes, because restoring your front yard or backyard is different from restoring the res from Paula, which is different from trying to grow native plants around whatever crop you're growing that you're bringing your income from. So trying to figure out a way to thread through these three different audiences to make this all work, we're going to take a broad view of what a landscape is. And we're going to start with the reason why we're all here today, and that's because California is awesome. If you thought California wasn't awesome, then I'm going to give you a short little quip about why it is super awesome, and maybe I'll help to convince you. So California is botanically one of the most diverse states in the US. We have nearly 6,000 plant species in California. And of those, 2,100 are endemic, which means that they're only found in California. So these are the California native species, which is pretty cool to think about, that these species are found in California and nowhere else in the world. California currently has more plant species in it than Hawaii does. And you think of Hawaii, you think of like jungles and mountains, and it's just amazingly lush. And California is even more diverse. Now, California is a bigger state, of course, but still, like when you think of California, when you think of Hawaii, you think of like botanical, and it's rich and it's amazing. And you know, there's the leis that go around your neck, right? Right? They don't give you leis when you get off the Southwest flight and land at the airport here. On top of that, we do have about 1,800 non-native plant species in California, and about 200 of those are invasive plants. And those invasive plants are non-native plants that are causing some sort of harm. So they're like weeds, but even worse than weeds. They're the bad weeds. But one of the reasons why California is so diverse is because we have great weather. Even though it is almost winter, it is spring right now outside. It's going to be 80 degrees, blue skies, sunshine. There's even plants that are in flower right now. If you squinted hard enough, I could trick you into thinking that it's like April outside. It's amazing. Other parts of the US, the less fun places to live, are currently under storms and snow, and people are shoveling driveways and things like that. Like I don't deal with that. I'm in California, and I'm a low elevation California person, specifically because I don't want to deal with all that nonsense. So we have a relatively unique and rare climate in California. It's called a Mediterranean climate. There are 5 places in the world where this climate is found. One is California, the other is the Mediterranean basin. hence the name, and also showing that some scientists are not very creative. They named the Mediterranean climate after the Mediterranean basin. But still, Chile, South Africa, and Southern Australia are also the areas that round out our Mediterranean climate. So if you think hard enough about the climate of California, what makes the California climate so amazing? And this is not a rhetorical question. Go ahead.
Oh, it's the ocean current. You get this cold water coming down out of the Alaska and so forth. Against the nice hot desert, you get evaporation and you get cooling all the time. So
you get cooling all the time.
You get natural air conditioning.
You get natural air conditioning. Yes. So what does that make our climate for the summers like?
Cooler than it would be.
Cooler than it would be. Nice, but not super hot. Okay. What about our winter climate? Wet, but not as cold as it would be. Marvelous. Yes, yes, it is marvelous.
Yeah.
So if you could wrap up a Mediterranean climate in 6 words: cool, wet winters, hot, dry summers. Now the cool part of this, we're not freezing cold, unlike most of the eastern US where it gets really cold in the winter. We get cool because we have the ocean right next to us, and it helps to keep it from not getting freezing cold. And then we have a hot, dry summer, but it's not boiling hot until you get out into Palm Springs or Borrego Springs. Then it's boiling hot in the desert. But our summer inland is moderated again by the ocean temperature. So we have this nice kind of range where it's not freezing cold, not boiling hot, which then means we also get a lot of plant diversity, because if you're a plant that can't tolerate frost, you can make it in San Diego County because we don't get a lot of frost, which is one of the reasons why we can grow avocados and oranges and things like that. And you can't grow those as well or at all in Colorado or Iowa or New York State. On top of that, we have a lot of smaller climate zones. This is the climate map of Southern California blown up in the whole state. And you can just see, the point for this is that you can see that there are a whole bunch of different little climate zones. And the whole, adage about anywhere in California, you can drive an hour and get to someplace really great. Well, yeah, that means you don't have to sit in traffic for an hour. But, assuming you're not trying to get anywhere on an afternoon or a morning, but maybe like on a Sunday morning, you can drive an hour and you can be in the desert, you can be in the mountains, you can be at the beach, you can be in a lot of really cool, fun places. You can't do that in Kansas. You drive an hour and you're still in the Great Plains. You could drive 10 hours across Texas and you're still more or less in West Texas. Like, you drive an hour in California and you get to be in all these really cool places, which means that we have plants that are adapted to being on the top of mountains like pine trees, and you have plants right next to the ocean. So it's completely different plant communities. You get all this really cool plant diversity smashed into an hour traffic-free drive, if we could all pretend like there's no traffic. On top of that, California rocks. We have rocks from nearly every major geologic era in California. We have rocks that are older than 500 million years, give or take, in California. And we have relatively recent rocks. So when you have all these different types of geologic formations, you start to get all these different types of soils, and plants really like growing in soil. And so different plants can grow in different soil types. So we have all of these amazing plants in California because we have amazing weather. We have awesome places that you can live or visit within about an hour's worth of drive because we have all these unique little climate niches. We have awesome different types of geologic wonders. We have lots of topography. There's mountains, there's valleys, there's riparian areas, there's the beach. So you can get to all sorts of new, fun, different areas in California. And with all of these little habitats, you can start plugging in different plants that do different things. Like if a plant likes to grow in the cold, it'll grow up on the top of the mountain. If it grows near the coast, you can get coastal plants that tolerate salt. So that's how you get all of this diversity in California. And if I can plug California some more, we have some amazingly beautiful plant communities. We have desert on the left, grassland in the middle, and wildflowers, poppies on the right. It's just really beautiful place to be, especially in the spring when it's blooming. On top of that, we have 20 million people in Southern California, nearly 40 million in the entire state. So when we couple a large population with being the most populous Western state and really active international trade at our ports and airports, we have a lot of things that accidentally fall off the truck, fall off of our boots, fall off the pallet, fall off the container on the back, and new weeds show up all the time. So how many of you see landscapes like this every spring on the regular? A couple. So I give another whole talk about the historic vegetation of California, and the very short of it is that people used to see landscapes like this before the late 1800s, pretty much every time it rained. And it was large parts of California. So there was huge, vast areas of wildflowers and just absolute beautiful places. And we don't have as many of those anymore. We have some of them, but not as many. This started with the Franciscan Passionist missionaries coming into California in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, and they purposefully or accidentally brought with them a whole bunch of weed species. It possibly as contaminants in their crops, but also just because they were doing things. And so some of these species are still here today, nearly 250 years later. Like there's storkbill that's probably in your garden, and it came in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and it's still here. It's not going away. Same thing with the picture on the left, that's wild oats. That's the big tall grass that grows about 4 to 6 feet high. It's a winter grass, and that was brought by the missionaries. They mucked it up. I mean, they mucked it up in a lot of different ways. But I'm a plant ecologist, so I'm going to be talking about they mucked it up with regards to the plants here. We don't have as many cool plant communities because we have all of these weeds in Southern California, and we can not thank the missionaries for that. And then on top of that, since California became a place where a lot of people from all over the world came, starting with the gold rush and continuing through the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, we got a whole bunch more new weeds popping up in California. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the grass in the picture here, red or ripgut brome. This is ripgut brome. It gets stuck in your socks. It's really nasty when you're working out in like April and it dries out and the seeds haven't fallen off yet. Just a horrible plant, and it's here. And many of these plants that have invaded California are not going away. We have plants that the missionaries brought, and they're still here. There's ripgut brome, which is spread across almost every part of California that it can occupy, except for the driest deserts in our coldest mountains. It's here to stay, and it's spread across most of the western US. Like that's just irreversible. It's not going back. That cat is out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle, whatever metaphor you want to use, pick it. So we have a lot of these landscapes in Southern California that are dominated by invasive plants. I've got 3 examples here. And this is not to say that all of Southern California is dominated by invasive plants. I mean, we can look right out the windows here and we can see that the hills are filled with chaparral. It's really nice. And again, here we can see the hills are filled with chaparral. But there are large areas of Southern California that used to be these absolutely amazing places that we have a small window into now, but lots of them are covered with weeds. And they're ugly too. So again, we have plenty of places that look really nice and they're beautiful and they're filled with mostly native plants. Some weedy areas out here, out there. But for the most part, they're looking pretty good. So we've got this mix of communities in California where we have native plants and we have just weed-filled, infested habitats that are nothing like what they used to be. But this doesn't even get to the question that I want to discuss today, and I've already wasted 15 minutes of my time giving you the preamble of why California is so awesome. So now you're really invested in why California is so awesome, and I've set you up for the twist here, which that, you know, we have all these plants and you know, the Franciscan missionaries brought them in, and why didn't they just stick to around the missions? Why did they have to keep spreading and spreading? Why are these weeds weedy? And I'm, you know, as a plant ecologist, it pains me a little bit to not talk about these plants being invasive, because by definition they are invasive. They're non-native and they're causing some sort of harm. But it doesn't make a good alliteration or a fun turn of phrase to say, why are invasives invasive-y? So I'm going with, why are weeds weedy? It's more fun to say. You can say it yourself too. Why are weeds weedy? So if we think about what a plant does, then we can start to answer this question. And so the question for you all is, what job does a plant do? Or why does a plant look like a plant? And it's, again, not a rhetorical question. We can have a little discussion here. And one of the hints I'll give you, that in biology, one of the main ideas is that form follows function. The way something works is the way it acts. And this kind of makes sense, like for most things, like, you know, we wear clothes to keep our bodies warmer, to protect ourselves. So why does a plant look like a plant? I'm stalling for time so you can think of, why does a plant look like? To survive. To survive how? Like, what is it surviving against?
The environment, the elements.
Seeking sunlight,
everything.
Okay, see, in the environment, what's one of the biggest things that happens in the environment that a plant's trying to avoid?
Something's trying to probably either eat it or kill it, or
okay,
trying to survive the weather.
Trying to survive the weather, herbivory, dryness. Yeah, plants are trying to keep all that moisture inside themselves. Yeah. Sorry? Competition from other plants. You're like 4 slides into the future. Like, we're going to nail that soon. But thank you. That's great. Yes, competition from other plants. Procreation. Everybody's job is to reproduce. If our ancestors didn't have had babies a long time ago, we wouldn't be here today. And there's a baby in the room right now. So plants are doing the same thing. They're trying to reproduce. Everybody's trying to make babies, whether you're a plant or whether you're a person. Well, maybe not every person, but the job of humanity. Anyways, what else is a plant trying to do? Somebody said it earlier. We haven't covered it yet.
Did we talk about the pests against any?
Yeah, herbivory and pests. I'll give you a hint. It's the green. Why are plants green?
Oh, why is green?
Photosynthesis. They're making their own energy.
Yeah, they're also cleaning the air.
And they are also cleaning the air, yes. And so one of the, you know, I mean, we see it all the time, but like, we can't make our own energy. We need plants to make the energy for us, and then we can eat plants or eat animals that eat plants. So again, one of the reasons why plants have these big fat leaves is because they're collecting sunlight. That's one of the things that they need to do to get energy to then make babies. And they have to absorb water. We talked about this. They got to keep the water inside themselves so they don't dehydrate and die. And they eventually reproduce. So these are kind of the basic jobs of the plant. All right, okay. Gentleman in the hat back there, you're up now. What else do plants need to do?
They need to outcompete others.
They need to, look at that. They need to outcompete others. Plants don't live by themselves. They live in a community where there's all sorts of other plants doing the same thing. They have roots under the soil that are competing with each other, and they have leaves in a canopy. We have an oak tree on the left and an oak tree on the right. Those are two separate oak trees, and those two trees are competing against each other to catch as much sunlight as possible so they can make as many babies as possible, or in the case of oaks, acorns. So they're doing all these jobs while also competing against each other. It's kind of like the you've seen those stupid game shows where they put somebody in like a wind tunnel-y box and there's a bunch of money going around and then they have to grab the money. How different would somebody act if two people were in there and they were competing against each other trying to get the same amount of money? They might have a very different tactic. I'm not promoting or condoning violence. I'm just saying that when you're locked in a place because you have roots in the ground and your neighbor's roots are coming over to you, you have to be able to tolerate their roots trying to steal the resources that your roots are trying to take up. Okay, so plants are trying to catch sunlight, absorb water, survive against their neighbors that are also competitive, and then eventually reproduce and make babies. And thank you for bringing your baby here. It helps my point out tremendously. Plants are really successful at doing this. They figured out hundreds of thousands of different ways of doing it. There are currently just under 400,000 known plant species, and a couple thousand are described every year. So we're figuring out all the different ways plants do these basic three jobs: catch sunlight, absorb water, survive against their neighbors to reproduce. So what does this have to do with weeds? I've given you now 2 preambles and I still haven't even talked about weeds and habitat restoration yet. I know, it's a lot. But this has everything to do with weeds, because as all of these plants are competing against each other to do this job of growing into a plant and then making babies, they have to win against their neighbors. And the weeds are winning against their neighbors more than the native plants are. I know this is kind of circular logic, but we're just going to have to go with it. And this happens in basically every environment in California. There are very few places where the weather is so extreme in California that the plants are fighting against the weather more than they're fighting against their neighbors. So plant competition is real for most plants in California. And there's even books on this, perspectives on plant competition, scientific textbooks that are interesting to people like me, but honestly are a little dense. But they're good books. And so summarizing an entire textbook into one slide is always a problem. But the basic point I want to tell here is that there's this competition hierarchy among plants. And weeds are competing at a very high intensity and doing a really good job at doing it. Invasive plants, those ones that are weedy and they're causing harm, are doing an even better job. They're like the top of the competition hierarchy. And then basically the things that we want to have in our yards or gardens or farms are less competitive. And that sucks. But that's just kind of how it works. And part of it is because these weeds have done something. So when these weeds have been transported, usually across continents or oceans, they lose something. Oftentimes they lose a predator or a pathogen or some sort of herbivore that eats them. So now they don't have a disease or they don't have a little bug that nibbles on their seeds or flowers, and they can thrive. Whereas the native plants still have those diseases that are here that are native to California, and those native insects are still here, and they're still nibbling on the native plant seeds. So they're not released from this competition where the weeds are. Or they grow differently, or they tolerate disturbance, or they just make a bunch of seeds. Like there's some plants in the world that are just really, really prolific seeders, and not a lot of our California natives are super prolific seeders. And then you can combine some of those reasons as well as to why weeds are weedy. So if you take plants that can grow relatively tall, relatively quickly, and make a lot of seeds, you can get things like eucalyptus being invasive. You know, by its own, doesn't really look like it, but once eucalyptus seedling grows to be about 4 feet or so, there's not really many native plants that can compete against it and kill it. So over time, that eucalyptus tree is going to win, and it's going to shade out everybody else below it, more or less. So because weeds are weedy, and again, much better than invasives or invasivity, because weeds are weedy and they outcompete native plants, then just over time you get this cycle of weeds dominating on landscapes like this, where you have mustards, exotic mustards, exotic annual grasses, eucalyptus trees, and a little patch here of native riparian forest. And these landscapes, again, they're all over Southern California, but they're not everywhere. And I'm a scientist, I like graphs. So here's the weeds are bad graph, and basically that's what this graph here means. So this is where scientists have removed Cape ivy, which is a weed in Southern California, and they look at the responses. And when they remove Cape ivy, the native plants bounce back. There's more native plants when Cape ivy is removed than when it's here. Like you can see this little tiny bar graph right here, it's almost close to 0. There's almost no native plant recruitment under a canopy of Cape ivy. Cape ivy is a big viney thing, and you just don't get a lot of native plants growing in it. Is that a question?
Well, I just want to say that weeds also get a lot of help from us. We tear things up, we plow things, we make roads, we transport things, so they're getting a lot of help from us. We create disruptive things.
Oh, we disturb the soil all the time. Absolutely, yes. Yes. So yes, they thrive in disturbed areas, definitely. But yeah, this is just, weeds are bad. And then even when you remove Cape ivy, which is the more dominating weed, all of these other non-native plants come into its place. So you can get rid of one weed, and then 4 more species come in at its place. Then you have to get rid of those weeds to finally get the natives to come in. So we have a whole suite of weeds. We've mucked up California in multiple different ways, starting with Franciscan missionaries. So this is where we start to divide up into the different audiences for this talk. I'm summarizing another whole hour-long presentation that I give about the benefits of native plants in your yard or your landscape. And there are numerous benefits to having native plants there. You get increased pollinators, you get increased beneficial insects, so the insects that eat the other insects that are pests. You get increased wildlife in your yard, whether that wildlife is birds or small mammals, things like that. Many of our native plants are just absolutely beautiful. And they also can lower fuel moisture. Many of them can have more moisture inside the plant during the early parts of the summer to help reduce risk of wildfire. They are harder to find in the nursery trade. There's not as many nurseries that sell native plants. You can't just go to your big box blue or orange store and go to the garden center and find them. Some of them do require maintenance. They're not necessarily just plug them and let them go. And if you're growing them by seed, the seed is really expensive depending on what species you're planting. But the whole point here in this graph is that the number of butterfly species on exotic plants on the left and native plants is vastly different. You can see that the number of butterflies on native woody ornamentals is much, much higher than the number of butterflies on exotic woody plants. Yes?
You get to this in a minute, just tell me, but I'm curious to hear more about the comment that one of the benefits of natives is that they lower fuel moisture, because I think one of the things that seeps into our consciousness is that we need to do brush abatement because that increases wildfire risk. And when I hear brush, I think native chaparral. So maybe you can speak more about that at some point.
Oh yeah, you're getting into a whole thing. And so no, it's fine. So Cal Fire's defensible space and zoning guide is a really great, useful way to help to protect your house from a wildfire coming in. So yeah, there's multiple dimensions of this, and one of them you're talking about is like just having all of that fuel and brush there. It can be a problem, especially if you have a wind-driven fire, especially if it's in the fall when it's the dry season. My point here is just that with regards to ignition, if you have something like annual grasses, which dry out quickly, the fuel persists on the landscape, and they're really easily ignitable. They're like the tinder that you put in a campfire. They ignite really easily compared to something like a chaparral shrub, where if somebody on the side of the road, which I would never recommend, like pitched a cigarette into a chaparral shrub, it is much less likely to ignite because the fuel's higher up, it is more spread out, and the leaves are thicker, so it's just less easily ignitable than having that carpet of annual grasses on the ground. So that's where I'm going with this point. But you have a very good point. That's another whole like half hour of contentious topics. Okay, so I didn't do a great job of convincing you that native plants are beneficial. I showed you one graph and I didn't give you the whole cool story, but there's lots of cool stories that I've given other talks. So you're just gonna have to do the trust me bro kind of a thing, or don't trust me, and then we can talk after. So regardless of what kind of landscape you're working on, whether it's a agricultural landscape, your front yard landscape, or the wild kind of landscape, there are places for native plants to fit into your landscape. This is another whole, like, I'm condensing half hour of material at least into one slide, unfortunately. And the techniques for doing this obviously depends on the scale you're working at. If you're working across acres and acres, you might be using hydromulch, hydroseeders. If you're working just in your front yard, then a shovel and some gloves will be just enough to restore your yard to promote some native habitat, and some seeds. Or if you have herbivores, sometimes they need a little protection to get them established, and once they're established, then you can pull that protection off. So there's many different ways of how you can restore your landscape, and given that a chunk of this audience is growers and the homeowners or the general public and then professional restorationists, it's hard to talk about any method in particular that works for the whole audience. But just there's a smattering of ways to do this. And luckily we do have hundreds of native plant species that are sold in a couple of nurseries in California, or you can mail order them from nurseries as well. There's also hundreds that are in books that are recommended. And there's kind of a dual message here. One is that, like, there's only a couple hundred plant species in the native nursery trade compared to the 6,000 that are in California. So there's not that many, but how many of us are really going to be able to figure out which of the 100 do we want to plant 6 in our yard? Like selecting 6 from a group of 200 plants is still a lot of work, and it's overwhelming to most people. So I've kind of created a little short list here of things that you can use, generally well adaptable species or types of plants that should work well for your yard or landscape. And if you're a professional conservationist, then some of these aren't going to work well depending on where you are. But for the most part, for the average person who has irrigation in their yard or farm, this is a general good list. And I'll go through some of these. I still have time. I've still got plenty of time. Okay. Annual wildflower mixes: poppies, lupins, clarkia, tidy tips, goldfields, collinsia, which is called Chinese houses for some reason. I mean, it does look like Chinese houses, but whatever. They're great. They look absolutely gorgeous. They're extremely difficult to maintain. Once you start getting weeds in here, you're hand pulling the weeds out of the wildflowers. How many of you want to hand pull weeds out of wildflowers? Okay, so the 4 of us who raised our hands, we get to have wildflowers in our front yards. The rest of us don't even worry about wildflowers. I mean, you can have them for a couple of years, and then it's going to get infested with weeds, and then you'll do something else, which is fine. Maybe you'll put in things like perennial grasses. Purple needlegrass or deer grass is very common in the nursery trade. Beautiful grass, has cultural uses as well for basket weaving. Just really beautiful plant. We have a lot of herbaceous perennials. So these are perennials that are not woody. They're kind of soft and green. You can almost like bend the stem and they don't snap because they're not woody. These are, for my list, mostly penstemons, which are here on your right, and then we have milkweeds. Narrowleaf milkweed or California milkweed are excellent milkweeds to use in the garden, and they do need a little bit of irrigation to keep them alive. California buckwheat, great pollinator plant, has lots of flowers that come in the summertime when many other plants have already senesced. So you get to add to the blooming season, and you'll get a lot of little native bees and butterflies coming in on this plant. Also does not mind getting a haircut. It can be mowed, down to a foot, 6 inches or so, give or take, and it'll come back. Yes, in the back?
Well, I'd love to be able to access the pictures, since you're focused on my native environment where I live here. I see a lot of those plants on my property, and I don't know the names of them, and here they are.
Okay, so
is there a website that has these pictures on it?
No, there's some places that have these lists. It's kind of my
Yeah, they're scattered.
They're scattered. Yes. I don't have like a common website for it to send you to. However, if you don't know the name of plants in your yard, the app Seek is a really good one to use. SEEK. Download it onto your smartphone, and you point the camera at the plant, and it'll give you a good idea of what the plant is. It's usually not wrong. It's usually wrong with wildlife because wildlife moves and it's small, but you can like put it right up to the flower of the plant and I'll tell you this is a California poppy, and it's right like nearly all the time. Other small shrubs, brittle bush, there's a coastal type and the inland type, and then California fuchsia, which has these beautiful reddish, pinkish flowers. Other small shrubs that smell really good are sages. We have white sage, black sage, and Cleveland sage, which are all native to San Diego and Orange counties. Really good, easy to grow plants. White sage tends to be a common, like gophers love it. So you have to be careful of the gophers around that. And then working into larger shrubs, things like California lilac, ceanothus works really well. There's a bunch of different varieties. And you can kind of see in this picture, there's all sorts of different colors of blue and purple. California lilacs. So there's a lot of different varieties out there. Ray Hartman is a really good one that works well in most situations. And then adding another large shrub, manzanita. These are the ones that have that red, silky, smooth, almost like the plant was dipped in chocolate kind of bark. Really, really gorgeous. Most of them bloom in the winter, early spring. So again, you don't have that. Most of our plants bloom in the spring, but if you add manzanitas, you're getting earlier bloomers, so you can get flowers in your yard or your landscape for a much longer period of time. Western redbud, Cercis, another great plant. It's in the pea family, produces a prolific burst of flowers that look like little pea-shaped flowers, and then has these little bean pods on it. Yes?
The redbud flowers are edible. They're great on the salad.
Red?
The bloom family.
Okay, somebody said that the redbud flowers are edible. I don't know anything about that. Thank you. And then if you have space for big trees, coast live oak, sycamore, absolutely gorgeous. I can talk all day about oak trees. They're absolutely amazing. So I'm just going to stop myself and say, like, beautiful trees. If you have a lot of space, oaks. So kind of putting this all together, you could have a tree, a really large tree, some large shrubs, 10, 15, 20 foot tall, manzanita, ceanothus, smaller shrubs, sages, brittle fuchsia, and then getting down to perennial grasses. And so I've kind of stacked things in a nice orderly list for depending on how big you can fit this into your landscape. Yes?
So all the ones you've listed there, are there any of the native plants that compete well against the invasive plants?
No. Most of these guys stink at competing against invasive plants. But if you grow things like a white sage large enough, then because it's larger than most of the annual grasses, it'll survive well enough on its own. But yeah, like annual grasses compete really, really well against California native perennial plant seedlings. So if you are a little white sage seedling and you're surrounded by annual grasses that are invasive, you're probably going to die. So I was also told that I should cover erosion here, and I'll cover that really quickly. So if you're living on a hillside or you're trying to work on hills, I'm going to give the short version of what to do with eroding landscapes. And yes, I'm referencing Spaceballs when I talk about the short version and dating myself. Spaceballs? Anyone? Okay. All right. So soil erosion happens in all of our different types of landscapes, whether it's our yards, our farms, or the conserved areas we're working in. And general signs of early stage erosion are rocks are starting to get exposed. But that's tricky because you might live on a place with rocky soil, so you'll naturally have a bunch of rocks. So then you have to figure out, well, how many more rocks are becoming visible in my rocky soil. But things like where you're starting to get water and sediment moving across the landscape, which is hard to see in that picture, or just roots getting exposed. Roots grow underground, so if you have roots growing above ground, there's usually ground that is missing, and that's erosion. When erosion is really bad, it's really easy to spot. You're looking for giant trenches in the ground. Duh. I mean, you don't need to be told by a scientist that erosion is big trenches in the ground and this is a problem and it's costly to fix. You're smart enough to figure this out on your own. But yeah, once you're trying to mitigate for erosion, it's really expensive, really difficult, especially if you're on a slope. So when you have somewhat earlier erosion, you put out straw wattles. When you have something that looks like this, straw wattles are not exactly a good option because the straw wattles won't even stop the water from eroding in all of those rills and gullies. So like one of the cheaper erosion tools just doesn't work when you have serious erosion. You have erosion because you have bare ground, because you have some sort of soil disturbance. It's been plowed, it's been mowed, it's been disked, it's been burned, it's been turned into a parking lot years ago and somebody abandoned it, whatever. Or there's a slope. Almost all these pictures that I show you about erosion is that there's slopes. And once you get a slope and bare disturbed soil, you're going to get erosion as soon as it rains. So it means you need to limit that bare ground, limit soil disturbances, or reduce that bare ground by adding native plants in. And I talked about a whole list of native plants that you can add, and adding in those native plants will really help because they're deeply rooted. They'll help to hold in that soil. And as long as you can get them established, then they will start to catch some of that soil and reverse erosion. So this is the crash course on mitigating erosion. Wattles, straw bales. This is where heavy equipment has come in and regraded a stream channel. Cover crops can definitely help with erosion. Planting native plants and mulch. Mulching, assuming it's flat enough. Mulching on the hillside, the mulch will just fall away and become your neighbor's mulch. Most of us don't want to give our neighbors mulch. And with that, perfect, I'm out of time. So there's my email address. Do we have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I want to hope that you have, as an expert, have the answer to this question regarding invasive fountain grass.
Yes.
Yes, you touched on it briefly. Here it is a major, major problem.
Yes.
It's in our downtown, all the alleys, every crack, everywhere. Some people planted the regular kind, I'm saying.
The green fountain grass, yeah.
Consider the natives, the invasive fountain grass. They plant it because it grows up and it has feathery blossoms, and I have gone to a place where trying to eradicate it, and it's being planted as an edging on their property. I mean, they're carefully cultivating it. Now,
people love fountain grass. I don't know why.
I want to understand from you the what I'm understanding, which is called the purple fountain grass, which is now being sold in nurseries, of course, and landscaping people are using it tremendously. I've been told that it is sterile and does not reseed itself, and then on other writings I read, it is not totally sterile and can possibly reseed and maybe even produce the parent, the regular non-colored invasive fountain grass. So I'm hoping that you have the answer to that. We have it seriously here in Fallbrook.
Yes.
The bad kind.
Yes. So the question about fountain grass, the green fountain grass is invasive, it's non-native, it spreads, its seeds are fertile, it's awful. It is the problem that we all have. The purple variety is sterile, but it is not completely sterile. It can cross-pollinate with other similar grasses and produce viable seed. It doesn't do it very often. So we're looking at the difference between 100% and a less than 100%. So if it was 100% sterile, then I would just avoid the fountain grasses altogether and plant deer grass. It's a great looking plant. And but I'm not in charge of these decisions, and people don't ask me what they want to put. So I would just use fountain grass. I would use deer grass.
One extended question. There is a nursery in our locale who is obviously going out in the boonies somewhere, digging it up, canning it, and selling it. The invasive type, the green kind. Is there any organization that controls what is sold in nurseries, etc.? You shouldn't be selling that stuff.
So nurseries are regulated in different ways, and as long as the plant is not on some sort of a noxious weed list, then the nursery can sell it. So in the US we have more of a these things can't be sold list, and then everything else can be sold. So there are campaigns like the Plant Right campaign, which is working with nurseries to try and educate nursery growers to not sell invasive plants that aren't on those lists.
There is an organization in Sacramento that is based in Sacramento for the Council for Invasive Grass. Why Plant a Pest is their.
No, don't plant a pest.
Pardon?
It's not why plant a pest, it's don't plant a pest. Yes,
Right,
they make brochures, don't plant a pest, fountain grass is on it. Deer grass is a great alternative to fountain grass, but the purple fountain grass is less invasive or not invasive, and the green fountain grass is the one that's gotten out and escaped and is all over the road cuts.
For the audience to know, Mission Resource Conservation District got some local funding to help eradicate that in the community, so they're helping to fight it.
Wonderful.
It's a big task.
Good for the Mission RCD.
Right.
Yes.
A couple of comments. One regarding your last topic there, erosion. The art of permaculture has many, many benefits of looking at your land, evaluating it, see what you got, see what you want, make a plan, and set forth on it. Swales are one option on some properties. Item number 2, plant availability. With a 5-minute walk down this street here is Rangetto's Nursery with a wide selection of California natives. So it's a good resource just down the hill.
What was the name of the nursery?
Rangetto's.
Rangetto's Farm Supply. They have several.
All right, in the back.
Is there any work being done in your lab or in any of the others on how to control invasives? Because as a land manager, we're just fighting a losing battle, trying to handful things and sheet mulch and doing all these things. Is anybody working on like sort of some way we could just zap them all?
Is there a way we can
Like,
that's a whole nother, yes. I'm happy to talk with.
They release like pheromones to get them, or like there's got to be some larger control than all of us trying to pull weeds on your own property.
The largest scalable control methods are biocontrol, where they find some sort of insect from that invasive plant's home range, where it might eat the seeds or something like that, or disease, and it generally you try and find ones that only attack that plant species and nobody else, and doesn't attack the California natives either. So it costs about $2 million to start, plus a decade or two to then test these things in a lab where in the home range, and they test it, and then they get permits to bring it into quarantine facilities in the US, and then they test it all again. They have released some of these insects, like there's an insect that attacks the seeds of puncture vine, goat's head, and there's another one that also attacks the stem, so it doesn't grow as large and matted. It takes a lot of money and a lot of time, and you only want that pest to be species specific, because if it's attacking your noxious mustard, you don't want it to attack broccoli and cabbage and all the other things. Maybe some people want it to attack kale. I don't know. But broccoli's still edible. Yes?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to plant like a cover crop. I got a small vineyard, and before I wasn't even thinking about what type of, I guess plants I could use in there, but now to hear your talk and everything that's going on, is there like a native cover crop seeds that you would recommend or something? Or, I don't want to plant anything invasive that's going to create more problems in the future.
Yeah, the issue with, yes, there probably are. The issue would be cost. Some of these seeds can be really expensive per pound, and depending on how big your vineyard is,
It's pretty small.
It's pretty small, yes.
3 acres.
Okay. There's some, like, poppies could work, things like tidy tips could work. Maybe not lupins. These are lupins. There's probably some species that you could find that would work. They might be expensive though, even at 3 acres. How am I doing on time? Okay, maybe 2 more questions in the back.
got me a question, but most of the plants, native plants that you have described and talking to us, the Public Land Conservancy off the Stagecoach Road has a garden. And in that garden, we have almost all of the plants that you've been talking about. Second thing is that in suppressing weeds, the Public Land Conservancy has a native plant restoration group, and they put cardboard down over large areas, and then they put mulch over them, and that works great to kill weeds. On my own property, I have used plastic, clear plastic, which was a mistake because it killed all the above ground, but it didn't kill any roots, didn't kill any seeds. So if anybody's going to use plastic to suppress weeds, use clear plastic.
No,
because
so
it will heat up faster.
okay, so that's a whole integrated pest management.
Mulch works great, and it's not that expensive to do.
Cardboard mulch is great, assuming you've got like a quarter acre or less, give or take. Once you're beyond that, cardboard mulch is difficult to work with at scale. Black, depending on what you want to do, the black plastic is called tarping. The clear plastic is solarization. The solarization will bake the soil better with the clear plastic, but you do need to buy the UV stabilized or treated plastic so it doesn't break apart under the sunlight because plastic kind of rots. I give that talk. It's IPM for weeds. It's another whole hour and go through all of the different weed techniques one by one, and there's like 20 or I don't know. There's a lot, but it's fun. Last question.
I was just wondering if there was any landscape companies in here that specialize in natives. If you could give me a card and also maybe talk to Public Land Conservancy. They can make a directory of people who are in the landscape business who specialize in planting natives. That would be probably helpful.
There's one fellow named Craig Rubin, and that's his specialty.
Greg Rubin.
There's
Yeah.
someone local too, Walker Wilson, who started the Walker's Wildlands Native Plant Nursery in Culver. Yeah.
All right, with that, I'm out of time, and I was Bea's warm-up act, so thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Chris. And before we go to the other presentation with Beatriz, we're gonna make a change of the slides and everything. I just want to mention and say thank you so much for being here. We have people here from the NRC